MrInternetMan DeviantArt page, he dedicates more to his own original works, mostly his own original webcomics. More now, not saying that his other page doesn't do that either, but his MrInternetMan page is dedicated more to the mature side of things when it comes to his comics, if you will, comes to his creations and OCs. Basically, I was just checking something there. But basically, MrInternetMan, several years ago, introduced us to what I consider, honestly, his mascot, his icon that kind of helped put him on the map a little bit. And that is a character named Demonica. Demonica is actually a mischievous demon elf that actually has a good heart and a good soul, but can get in all kinds of mischievous trouble. Now, you might say, well, is that all she is? Well, here's where I think, but here's where MrInternetMan takes his love for superheroes, Marvel and DC and such, and takes inspiration from it. Because you see, Demonica is not just some mischievous demon elf that appears out of nowhere. No, she's actually the alter ego of a college student named Veronica. I guess you could look at her as sort of a comic book, nerdish comic book, bookworm, kind of very friendly, very popular student that attends a university, attends a college, and also has a regular job. Now, long story short, and I've mentioned this in several videos here on my channel where I've talked about this, Veronica ends up becoming Demonica because one day in the very first story, she comes into possession of a box that's set at her doorstep or something like that. And she opens it up and sees that it contains lipstick called Nightshade. So, just out of curiosity, she tries it on, and lo and behold, she ends up becoming Demonica. She becomes the mischievous demon elf. Now, of course, this kind of surprises her, and she reads the instructions a little bit, or the note that's left inside, and almost instantly, after reading that, she kind of gets a knowledge. She kind of like starts gaining the knowledge almost instantly of who this Demonica is, what her powers are capable of, what she's able to do. And in her first story, she tries the shape-shifting power and turns herself into another alter ego, from Demonica to the sultry Monica. So yeah, that's basically how the story. That's basically how it began with MrInternetMan's character, and to say that this character, like I said earlier, kind of put him on the map is an understatement, because as time has gone on, a lot of people, including recently one fellow DeviantArt artist called Kai Coronis, put up a picture of their original OC, who is a kind of a slime goo girl creature, if you will, called Kai, I think, actually called Kai, interacting with Demonica. Where that goes from there, I don't know. It's only one picture, and even MrInternetMan, among others, wants to see more. Maybe he might do his own pictures on it down the line. But MrInternetMan has crossed his character over with other artists. He's crossed it over with one artist's character called Lilith, and another artist's DeviantArt user, I should say, characters as well. And the way he does this is he takes his time and he distributes a variety of pictures. Sometimes, depending on how he feels in the situation, It could go from a minimum of 5-6 pages to almost 20 pages to 15 pages to what he just recently did was his Walk on the Wild Side story, 37 pages. Like I said, it all depends on what he's in the mood to do. Now, with that being said, as I was saying, with that being said, Mr. Internet Man, and what I'm trying to say is one of the more. Okay, let me get some coffee here again. Sorry about that. But one of the more interesting things about Mr. Internet Man's character is what he's done recently, the interactions he's had recently. You see, one of the people he's been interacting the most with is another fellow DeviantArter, like I said, I think I mentioned him, called Minor-Alterations. Now, Minor-Alterations has done a variety of stories, a variety of them. Some of them mostly have a similar theme. Slime girls, goo girls, shapeshifters, you name it. And recently, over the past, I would say half year now, almost a year, within almost the past year, I should say, Minor-Alterations has actually Minor-Alterations, what I'm trying to say, actually started a series of stories. Actually started a series of stories, or story series, I should say, titled after Mr. Internet Man's character, Demonica. Yeah. Demonica, basically thanks to Minor-Alterations, has her own story series. Now, the way this works out is, or the way this goes, basically what I'm trying to say, and like I said earlier, I'm doing this on the fly, off the cuff, if you will. But the way this goes is Minor-Alterations uses this story to introduce their own OC character called Ruby Walker, or Agent Ruby Walker. Now, Ruby Walker, the way she meets Demonica is quite interesting. She's unsure about her at first. She doesn't know, because she's going by with some reports of strange activity, I think. So she's not sure she's not sure what to make of it until she finally finds the source and the person behind it, and which ends up being Demonica. And basically, long story short, she's apprehensive at first, like she's not sure about Demonica, she's not sure if she could trust her, stuff like that. But it isn't until Demonica proves her worth, if you will, towards Ruby, basically proves that she can be trusted, she means no ill harm, that Ruby starts to reciprocate, basically return that trust towards Demonica, and they end up becoming friends and partners, if you will, or unintentional partners. And also, long story short, that evolves into them becoming very intimate with each other. In other words, they become lovers. So what this has to do with what Walk in the Wild Side is about is Minor-Alterations added a few character development and story developments, evolutions, if you will, into the story. One thing Minor-Alterations added from a character development standpoint for Demonica, for Demonica, is she is discovering new abilities about her powers she never thought she had. Although she might have been suspicious of, but she wasn't too sure of. Hold on for a sec. But like I say, she's not too sure of because, she's always been capable of doing a lot of things. As I've mentioned before when I've talked about it, she has the ability to basically change herself into anything she wants. Not just any person, but into anything, that she wants. She can turn herself into, she could turn herself, into any inanimate object, any kind of plant, any kind of vehicle, any kind of animal, mythical or real, or as shown as a favorite pastime of Minor-Alterations, and obviously it's becoming a favorite pastime of Ruby Walker's, Minor-Alterations character. She can also turn into a puddle of goo. She can turn into a puddle of goop. She can melt down. She could turn into a formless lake of, slimy latex, whatever, basically she can melt herself down into a puddle of black latex. Now, the reason I bring it up is because in the story, Minor-Alterations gives Demonica the character development and evolution of realizing that ever since she's become intimate and close with Ruby, these new powers have been unlocked. And what MrInternetMan does at first, and then Minor-Alterations incorporates into the story later on, is she discovers she has the ability to absorb another. And the way she does this, in one webcomic and chapter, she basically envelops Ruby Walker into her body. In other words, she kind of just starts wrapping herself around, kind of coating Ruby, or basically coating herself onto Ruby like a bodysuit, like a latex bodysuit, to the point that Ruby ends up being put to sleep, kind of like a Sleeping Beauty deal. Well, Demonica takes control. But that's not just it. You see, as MrInternetMan has pointed out and Minor-Alterations has followed up on, not only does Ruby get put to sleep, but Ruby as a human being ceases to be because her body mass ends up being converted into additional mass, to be added and spread throughout Demonica's body, so she'll be capable of being able to do other things, be able to do a lot more than just be limited with just being herself and doing it and all that. So by encasing, absorbing, and then converting Ruby's body into additional mass that gets spread throughout her body, she's able to do a lot more. She's able to do a lot more with her powers. And she does this by basically melting down into a puddle, and just slithering across town, doing this and that, shaping herself into different things. And this ends up becoming almost utterly mindless in a sense. She basically is letting herself go. This is not Walking the Wild Side, though. Let me kind of correct you on that. This is not Walking the Wild Side. This is from one of the Demonica story chapters. But anyway, she lets herself go to the point that when she shapes herself into a big car, a flying car, she literally explodes. Not in a fiery ball, but just like a bubble bursting in air. Pop! Pop, if you will, like a watery bubble bursting in air. And she just rains down upon the city to where all these little droplets of her take on a life of their own. And it isn't until she finds a group of girls in the college persuasion that she's able to kind of get herself back together, because she's able to absorb them as she absorbed another woman, a guy's fiance, who basically, according to the story, became understanding of what's going on, didn't have to worry about his fiance not being okay, because he, through the power of Demonica, was able to find out that, yeah, she's okay. In fact, she might be better than ever. Um, well, I wouldn't say it's the one to watch, Wild Hops. It's more along the lines of one to read and look at. But anyway, his girlfriend ends up being better than ever. But long story short, Demonica is able to reconstitute herself to the point that she's able to, like I said, able to basically kind of use her powers to kind of fix things, if you will. Because she even tries to communicate with Ruby, and even though she can sense Ruby inside of her, Ruby is in so much what's known as bliss, that she doesn't want to be disturbed. She has an idea of what's going on, but doesn't want to be disturbed, because she's in such a good mood. Be right back, guys. Sorry about that, guys. Just had to check something real quickly. Let me adjust my mic there. Make sure everything is good. Okay. Sure. All right. You guys can hear me? Good. But like I said, anyway, but anyway, Demonica is able to, like I say, reconstitute herself, kind of get back on track and fix everything. And what happens later on in Minor-Alterations stories, and you can find both Minor-Alterations and MrInternetMan at DeviantArt. But what Minor-Alterations does is they continue what's going on. They continue what's going on in a follow-up chapter. But what they also do, Minor-Alterations, that is they give character development and evolution for Ruby, because, well, Ruby is still blissfully inside and a part, if you will, of Demonica. Demonica ends up using her powers and abilities to kind of scope things out, help Ruby out on her case, shapeshift into Ruby, make multiple copies of Ruby herself, which are basically Demonica herself, and like I said, in the disguise of Ruby, turn herself into Monica for another part of the case, and then turn herself into a Catwoman-like character by donning the Catwoman costume. And it's during the time when she disguises herself as Catwoman that Minor-Alterations brings in this character development and evolution for Ruby, and she starts learning about the powers and how to utilize them, to the point that Ruby is able to kind of reconstitute her face on various parts of Demonica / Catwoman Demonica's body. She's able to reconstitute it, even to the point that she's able to extend her face out of one of the bodies, kind of like in a neck-wise kind of deal. You kind of seen those kind of things before, to come face to face with Demonica in a Catwoman form. So yeah, Ruby is starting to master the powers, to the point that not only is she able to reform her face, but she's able to extend her face from whatever part of the body is in a slimy, like, kind of in a oily, like, slimy form, as it's described in the story, to come face to face with Demonica. And it's here that we discover that Ruby is become fascinated with the liquidness, the shape shifting, the melting mostly the gooey melting slimeness, if you will. She's become fascinated with it. She's become fascinated with it because, as we find out in a later chapter, it feels like euphoria. It feels like the most relaxing sensation you can get. Like all your cares just disappear and nothing else matters. There's even a short story where they talk about this, what Minor-Alterations did, called A Matter of Style, where they mention this, and part of the inner monologue that Minor gives Ruby is Ruby's inner monologue is she, during her time doing that with Demonica, she couldn't think, and being shapeless and all that, that she couldn't think of a time where she existed as anything else. Like she would rather prefer being in a form where she could turn into a liquid, relax, and not worry about a care in the world and such. So anyway, long story short, because I know this is going long, but again, I'm going off the cuff here, no numerous numbers or anything. Long story short, this is where MrInternetMan's newest webcomic story, Walk on the Wild Side, comes in. Because, like I mentioned earlier, Demonica realizes she has these new abilities that are being unlocked from within her that she's kind of been, I'm guessing she's kind of been suspectful of, but wasn't sure of. She's starting to see these new powers and abilities come to be or come to fruition, that she wants to share it with Ruby. So the story is basically Ruby has planned a 2-week vacation, 2 weeks to spend with Demonica, to learn more about her, even sharing her abilities. And that's what Demonica does. Demonica shares in her abilities by basically, without absorbing Ruby or going into Ruby via Ruby's mouth, we would assume, or touching her, she just stands there and starts sharing her abilities by transforming both her and Ruby into slime girls. Purple slime girl for Demonica, red slime girl for Ruby. And Ruby is just fascinated with what's going on. In fact, she likes what's happening and can't think of how it can get any better. But Demonica continues the process of them changing into the basically faceless slime girls. And she just keeps egging and keeps encouraging and feeding to Ruby's new love and obsession with this gooey, slimy meltiness and whatever, to the point that she thinks, oh, you think this feels good, you like this and all that. It's just the one thing about being in this form is you just allow yourself to go with the flow. And one of the the first day of pages that MrInternetMan uploaded during the Memorial Day weekend ended with them being turned into slime-like pillars. In fact, one of the last lines that MrInternetMan gives Ruby to say is she feels like now she knows what it feels like to be a bowl of Jello. So next page basically continues this because one of the last pages, okay, so basically the first day of pages, the last two things that occur is not only does Ruby say that line and say the other line, it feels like all her cares are melting away. Demonica then adds to that, speaking of melting, and they end up melting down into what looks like, as some person put it, to certain parts of the female anatomy. No offense when I say that. So anyway, the next day we have another something like 20 pages, 18 pages worth of stuff being uploaded. And they end up, and again, Demonica is basically encouraging Ruby and all that, to the point that, hey, she's basically saying, hey, you think lying on the floor was great, just wait till we really get together. And they basically rise up a little bit and start twirling around each other. Like they start connecting, and all of a sudden you have this like big old a spear, almost like, and they just keep doing this, and it's just like a big old spiral like thing where you see purple on top of red and red on top of purple and all that. And they hold on for a sec. There's the phone call. I'll be right back. That's what I said. Be right back. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I told you that was going to happen. And it's good that she checks in and all that. So, but like I said, I knew that was going to happen. Anyway, though, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So basically, in the second day of pages that he uploaded, they start twirling around each other and become like this big spiral like entity, to the point that when they get to a certain moment, they splash down, kind of sploosh down, as MrInternetMan puts it in the webcomic, into what looks like an ocean, a lake of red and purple slime, basically mixed together. And this is where what a lot of people basically have said by commenting on it, the fusion starts to take place, because instead of talking individually, like I said, instead of talking individually like they were previously, they start talking in unison. In other words, they start talking simultaneously, and they start both saying, like, when they say certain things, they start and they use the word I, or the letter I, like I like this, I like that kind of deal. Instead of doing it individually, like it's Ruby saying it and then Demonica saying something later on with it, they're both saying, I enjoy this. I can't believe this is happening. I want more. And they're saying it simultaneously. And the way it's done is the word bubbles are put on top of each other, because you had like a red word bubble that represented Ruby and a purple one that represented Demonica. So now they're kind of like on top of each other, kind of coinciding with each other, to the point that they just keep going. They keep melding together. They go from being like this leg to rounding out to twirling around again, and to the point that they shape themselves into this red and purple ball. All that just is getting to the apex moment, if you know what I mean. And as they get to that apex moment, all of a sudden you see this pink light shoot out from the ball, and all of a sudden there's this big explosion. I guess you could say a climax, if you will. And the end result that we see happens the next day, and literally the next day, because on Sunday, that's when MrInternetMan put up the final batch of pages to the webcomic, where the end result, like a lot of people pretty much predicted, and I kind of saw coming, was a fusion. It was a fusion, but it was a fusion of what I looked at as being on a blank slate kind of deal. Because long story short, basically the combined fused form acknowledges itself as just one entity, it's self, and that's it. Acknowledges it hasn't rested that well in a long time, that it needs to pull itself together, get its bearings together. Basically acknowledges that, all, its memories all feel all jumbled up, like it feels like it's been living two lives, but that can't be right. So stuff like that. Hold on for a sec, guys. Over here. Alright, sorry about that, guys. Had to feed my dog there. She wanted, since I'm home, we give her, if any of us are home, like myself and my mom, we give her meat. Not every day, but just whenever. But yeah, I had to give her meat there. So anyway, long story short. Long story short, though, like I said, the fused being that they become doesn't have any real recollection of what it could be. It acknowledges that it's rested well, that hasn't rested that well in a while. But like I was saying before I went and fed my dog, it kind of looks at it kind of says that its memories are kind of fuzzy, it's kind of jumbled up, and it feels like it's been living two lives, but says that can't be right. And that eventually in time, everything will come back to her, and that it feels like she's not missing anything important, and that all that really matters to her is these powers, is the body she now has, the alluring body, sexy alluring body, I guess you can call it, and the powers that have been gifted. And this all culminates with this new fused combined being, just talking about how great these powers are, how much immense pleasure the powers are going to gives them, how it's able to use its mandible body, liquidy goo body to, become its own, to make into its own person, that she can turn into her own personal playground for her own amusement. How every movement is like another another pleasurable moment. And then the story just ends with the combined form just splooshing down onto a bed and then spreading out and turning the bed into what looks like a little miniature tub or pool, but instead of instead of being filled with like clear water and everything, it's full of black ooze. In other words, like oily ooze. And the story just ends with the combined form acknowledging that they'll just stay like that for a while. Be a big puddle, a giant puddle of joy, and that maybe they'll just stay that way for a while. Now, I know that sounded kind of weird to a lot of people, and I do apologize. But that's just how the story went. And again, you could check out the stories over at DeviantArt and MrInternetMan's DeviantArt page. But yeah, it is a fun story. It is no doubt it's a fun story. Don't get me wrong about that. It is a fun story. It is a fun story. Don't get me wrong. But I think the one thing that some people have been kind of critical about it, is the fact that the story seems to have ended abruptly. Now, I can understand why they feel that way. It's like you build up this story, and all of a sudden you just end it abruptly. Like, okay, where's the rest? Where's the rest? And here's the thing: MrInternetMan is not the first to be kind of accused of that. There's a review that a lot of people do of My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic, and one person of the fandom, whether the true fan or the not, depending, did a review on the season 7 episode. It did kind of a review. It's a play on mystery science theater, but basically they did a review, a review, whatever, on the season 7 episode, The Perfect Pair, which has been acknowledged as probably one of the best episodes of the series. Anyway, long story short, the way they end the review, the story, is they show a clip from, I think it's Avatar: The Last Airbender cartoon. Yeah, I think that's where it's from. They show a clip from the Avatar: Last Airbender cartoon where one of the characters is like, wait a minute, that's it? That can't be it. There's got to be more. That's how a lot of fans felt. A lot of fans and followers of MrInternetMan's works kind of felt like, wait a minute, that's it? That's how you're going to end it? You're not going to do any more? They kind of felt a little disappointed. And like I said, you can't really blame them for feeling that way, because it's like, well, wait a minute. So you're just going to end the story abruptly with them just lying on a bed as sort of like a little lake, little miniature pool? That's all you're going to do? And I think one person commented in the comment section that, look, it's 37 pages. I think that's enough. I think that's enough for us to enjoy. And I think the other reason, in my opinion, this is my opinion, guys. I think the other reason that that MrInternetMan ended the story that way, the reason he ended the story that way was, again, it's 37 pages, and he wants to and he wants to basically continue on with other work. Like, one thing that he does, and I think I've mentioned this before, but one thing he does is he ends up also doing some exclusive artwork for people like Minor-Alterations. He also wants to focus on his other DeviantArt page where he does some non-erotic stuff, basically on non-mature stuff. He wants to focus more on that. But again, he also, like I said, sometimes has to utilize his time to focus on drawing maybe some pictures to collab with or to go along with Minor-Alteration stories or other people's stories. And sometimes he also just wants to take a mental break and enjoy life as it is. Now, I'm not going to say that the story ending the way it did wasn't abrupt. It was. But I think the reason he also did it is it leaves it up to your imagination, to how you, to basically it's a thing of, okay, I know I ended it kind of abruptly instead of like, because he ended about 37 pages without, and instead of an even 40 page or whatever, 40 pages. But anyway, I think the reason he did that is because it leaves it up to your imagination. He leaves it up to you to kind of ask, okay, what happens next? And maybe you will be the one that be like, okay, this happens next. I'm going to add to the story, and this is what happens next. So, yeah, I think he did that for a reason. And that reason was to leave it up to your imagination, how you would interpret it. But it's not the first time he's ever done that. In fact, a lot of his stories, in a sense, feel like they end in a certain way. They end in a certain way. There have been various times, and I have to go back to look at it, but there have been various times, folks, where he has ended a story, a webcomic story, in a way that, like I said, he ends the story sometimes he abruptly ends them, like I said, in a way that, well, it feels like he abruptly ends them, but he does it because, like I said, he wants to leave it to our imagination. That's what a lot of people do. Either we like what they do or they don't. You take a look at Game of Thrones, and a lot of people don't like how that ended, and a lot of people are petitioning that it get remade and be done better, be done the right way. But maybe that was done for a reason. That reason being, hey, if you think you can do better, we'll leave it up to you. Use your own imagination. You got the funds to do your own little Indiegogo project or whatever to make what you feel season 8 should have been. Go ahead and do it. And I think honestly, when you look at it, that's how you have to view MrInternetMan's to view MrInternetMan's stories. The fact that basically it is, the way he ends them is to interpret them with your own story. To kind of interpret it, with your own stories and or your own theories and all that. And, that's what I think he did here. And like I said, it's not the first time. It's not the first time. I think MrInternetMan at one point had another page somewhere else on a more adult, kind of more of an adult version of DeviantArt. It wasn't for Affiniate, but it was something else. And at times he would actually take what's known as his uncut stuff, or what he couldn't put on DeviantArt, although he could, and he would add it over there. He would add it, he would add it over on that page, because he couldn't add it anywhere else. He couldn't add it on DeviantArt. I mean, he could, but he'd have to put a mature setting. But the other stuff he wants to do, he couldn't, because it's like going beyond mature. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, that's basically when you think about it, it's probably sometimes the best thing to do, because there are times I'm tempted, even though I don't really. I mean, I could do it. Sometimes I can't do it. Sometimes I'm just not in the mood. But there are times I feel like continuing stuff like that just to give my own spin on it. But I don't, because it's not that I don't think I could do a good job. Heck, I did at one point a long time ago. I did what's known as the redemption arc, or redemption story fanfic on Rescue Rangers. And you can find it, I think, at fanfiction.net and adultfanfiction.net. But I did it, and I actually enjoyed it. I actually had fun doing it. But that's when I had more free time. There are times like today, I'm off. I want to just relax, probably do a live stream podcast like this, and just be done with it. But yeah. It's. I look at the fact that it's not that Mr. Internet Man doesn't want to continue it. I'm sure if he had a lot more time on his hands, he would do it. Don't get me wrong. But he has other commitments, maybe to life, other jobs to work. He has, like I said, other commitments, maybe people he collabs with that he wants to focus on. And there's nothing bad about that. There's nothing really bad about that, because if that's what he wants to do, that's what he wants to do. We can't tell him yay or nay. We can't tell him either yay or nay about it, because it's not our call. It's his. I mean, there's no doubt that I think someone like Minor-Alterations, if they wanted to, they could extend on that, but they can extend on the ending and be like, okay, people want more to the story. You know what? I'll give it to them. I'll extend it, and they might incorporate that into their ongoing series, and they've done that before. They've done that before, so it's not the first time they would do something like that. Um, for example, one person that I follow on DeviantArt called Grape Athenia, and I do apologize if I pronounced that name wrong, doesn't always dedicate every day of her life, if you will, to her stories, like what dreams maybe what dreams may become kind of story. She doesn't always dedicate her life to doing that. She doesn't do that all the time. But when she does, she wants to, but when she does get to what I'm trying to say is, when she does get to the point where she decides to, continue the stories, she wants to make sure she has enough material to go with. In other words, she wants to give her time to think about, okay, what could I add in? And maybe she uses real life to be like, oh, that's interesting. I can incorporate something like that into the story. Oh, I can incorporate something like that. Or I can incorporate this that I'm seeing across the street. She wants to, I think, kind of build on ideas. But she also wants to give it a break, because there are people that, like myself, would like to see more of her What Dreams May Become series. There's a lot of us that would love to commission her again for stories like the Potion Palace. In fact, I'm the one that kind of helped really contribute to that a lot. I think that's what it's called, the Potion Place, I should say. The Potion Place Gina Caroline stories, if you will. I kind of helped contribute to a lot of that. But the point is, guys, it's up to Mr. Internet Man if he wanted to continue more. Now, like I said, his stories are not. I'll put it this way: his like I said earlier, before I really kind of got off the rails there, it's not the first time his stories have ended abruptly or felt like they ended abruptly. Excuse me there. But because there've been many times. There've been many times they've ended abruptly. Now, true, some of them have had resolution. There's one story where I think let me see if I can find it here. Hold on. Just got to get to his page. And get to the gallery. Gallery he has here on DeviantArt. Hold on. Oh, here it's called Comic Conventions. It's called Mystic Makeover Comic Conventions. And I think he did this 3 years ago. He actually did 3 years ago. 3 years ago. It doesn't feel like it. But basically, Demonica goes with two of her friends. Veronica, that is, goes with two of her friends to a convention. And decides, let me see if I can. And decides to, let's see. Oh, yeah, she hears a conversation between her two friends. I'm trying to think what her two friends' names are. I don't know what her friends' names are, but anyway, I think MrInternetMan puts it here somewhere. Let me see. No, he doesn't. But basically, her two friends, her two male friends, are kind of debating on who's the better character, if not who's the hotter comic book character, between Catwoman and Black Cat. Both kind of debating and arguing who's the ripoff, who's the legit, who's better, da 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 da. So Veronica is overhearing this because she's having lunch with them, and that's when she gets the idea to do what she's about to do. Because basically, she makes up the excuse that she wants to go visit some other panels, and she'll see him tomorrow. And when they say, "Okay, V, we'll see you then," she has a thought bubble that says, "Not unless I see you first." And this is where it comes into play. And this is what comes into play because basically, what she does is she goes into a bathroom, a women's bathroom. She puts a sign on there called "Closed for Maintenance." Obviously, she puts the sign on there. And she basically decides that since she doesn't normally do this at conventions, but she's not really competing this year at anything, she's going to make an exception. And she uses the opportunity to lock herself into the women's bathroom and turn herself into Demonica. So let's see. Let me see. So yeah, she basically turns herself into Demonica, and then she splits herself in two, kind of in a gooey kind of way. Not totally, but just kind of splits herself into two, makes twins. So, long story short, because I know I'm rambling on, I know people think, just get on with it, Brian. Long story short, she basically turns herself into Demonica, clones herself, creates a double of herself, and they both basically utilize Demonica's shapeshifting power to turn one of the Demonicas into Catwoman, a legit, almost identical, almost like legit Catwoman. You couldn't tell the difference whether this was real or not. Catwoman cosplayer, and the other into a Black Cat cosplayer. And what they do is they approach two of Veronica's friends and literally seduce them into teaching them about the card game they're doing, and then basically give them a night of fun, if you know what I mean. Because when Veronica shows back up to check on them or meet up with them and ask how their night was or the rest of the day was, they got these hearts in their eyes and all that, saying it was amazing. And she's just giggling because she knows exactly what she did. But yeah, basically that's an example of the fact that he doesn't always end a story abruptly. He does give it some kind of conclusion. He does give it some kind of conclusion. Anyway, long story short, I know I've been rambling on about that for almost an hour and a half, so I do apologize. But anyway, I would advise checking out Mr. InternetMan's DeviantArt page. It's Mr. InternetMan. It's Mr. InternetMan. It's the whole word. .deviantart.com, and also check out Minor-Alterations page, which is, if I can find it, is deviantart.com/minor-alterations. And like I said, the other one is Mr. InternetMan, or it's okay. Let me redo that. Mr. InternetMan's is DeviantArt.com/Mr. InternetMan. That's the whole name. That's a whole word. And then Minor-Alterations is DeviantArt.com Minor-Alterations. So check out those two pages. And check out the stories themselves, and you might enjoy them. You might find them. You might enjoy yourselves, and you might have some fun with them. I mean, even Minor-Alterations says something back on the 13th, saying that their even their blankety blank smut writing is better than season 8, that being of Game of Thrones. And even says that that's not a thing to be proud of, though. But point is, they're saying that even what they write is much better than what Game of Thrones delivered. Okay, anywho, do apologize for going for that long, but yeah, just check out their two pages. I think you'll enjoy them. You might get a kick out of them. And if they're not for you, they're not for you. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, unless, again, I'm going on off the cuff here, not numbers.